Welcome to episode 58 of Discourse in Magic with Marc Kerstein. Now, if you've never heard that name before, I'll tell you, Marc Kerstein is the iPhone Magic app guy. There's very few guys creating apps right now that do Magic, but then there's Marc, who's creating iPhone Magic apps that are absolutely incredible. I'm sure you've heard of them, things like Decibel, things like Earworm, and on the recent David Blaine special, he debuted one of his most recent releases, Wikitest. So you're going to absolutely love Marc's material if you have not checked it out already, and if you have, then I think you're really going to like diving deep into the episode. Hello everybody and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very, very special guest. We hinted at it last week and we're really excited to have him on. He is the creator of so many things that you've probably seen, so many different apps, things like Wikitest, Decibel, Earworm, the Jerks app, tons of different apps. I'm very excited to chat with him. Here he is, Marc Kerstein. Marc, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you guys?
Very, very good and
happy
really
to be talking
excited.
to you.
Yeah.
Great.
So let's dive in at the beginning. How did you get started in Magic?
It's the Magic set story. I think there's only a few of them on there, and yeah, for me it was. I'm sure you guys know. I'm sure you hear it all the time.
Yep.
Magic set, 4 years old, and I think that was about it. Really, I think it kind of just took off from there. It's not incredibly interesting.
Never let it down.
It's pretty standard. Sorry?
You never just put it down and you were just hooked from four onwards?
I've kind of gone through phases. Like there's been times where I felt, maybe I should focus on other stuff. I mean, I've always kind of done other stuff and had other interests and stuff as well. Magic's always been the main one, but there have been moments where I've kind of been a little bit maybe busier with other stuff or less into it or kind of wanted to let it breathe for a while and just, not do too much. So there were times throughout my childhood where I'd never leave home without a deck of cards in my pocket. And then there were times where I never did that. I mean, I don't really carry around cards that much now for different reasons. But I remember at the time just thinking, I think it's been pretty consistent with minor blips. Yeah.
So what was the transition like into doing professional Magic? I know you do a little bit of it. I don't know how much you do,
right.
I mean, outside of the creating. So what was the sort of transition into realizing that Magic could be a business, whether it was in terms of performing or eventually, or whatever the order was, creating apps?
I think what happened was I always kind of dabbled. Even when I was younger, I did kind of smaller events and events that weren't really hugely professional. And then I went to university and did a kind of normal, I say normal, I mean a kind of standard thing where I got a job straight away and I went into banking for a few years. And I just wasn't too happy there. And I was always thinking about what I could do other than be in the bank. And a friend of mine who's a full-time magician, a guy called Dan Farrant, who's a really, really good kind of professional magician, he said to me, why don't you just, if you're not sure what you want to do, rather than do this, why don't you do Magic full time and just, give that a go? And while you're doing that, you'll have a bit more time to kind of think about what it is you want to do. So that was kind of around 2013, where I kind of quit my full-time job and then started to do Magic, or at least do it full-time in one way or another. Yeah.
Wow.
And
so
then,
even still, it's kind of new. I mean, 4 years is a long time, but like having that sort of label as professional is still kind of new for you.
Right. So I mean, I think what most of my friends deem as professional would be a kind of gigging magician. For me, it's quite a bit different where I almost never take a gig. And if I do, it's because I don't know. I'll try and avoid it, but I'll take one on occasion. But I'll go out my way to avoid them. I normally find out if they're not very close to me, I'm like, nah, I'll just tell them I'm busy. I think it's funny because agents think that I'm really, really busy, but I think they don't realize that I'm actually just not keen on doing gigs. So
you're just uninterested, yeah. So what was the epiphany or the transition, or what was it like to start creating apps? When did that sort of come about?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened. So I've always been fairly techie. My dad is in IT, and I've always kind of loved computers and loved anything technology, and followed Apple through their kind of recent, I guess, I mean, it's not too recent anymore, I suppose, but when they used to be the underdog to Microsoft, and I've always kind of loved anything technical, even when I was a kid. And good friend of mine, a guy called Angelo Carbone, who I'm sure you know or know of, had an app on the App Store called Magic SMS, which was made by someone else originally, and he needed it updating to iOS 7. So Apple just released iOS 7, and Magic SMS was no longer usable, or it was usable to an extent until you looked like an idiot with a really old cell phone. And so he contacted me and said, can you update the app for me to iOS 7? My developer, I think, is busy doing other things. And I told him, no, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I can't make an app. It's one of those things, I think, when you're fairly technical, that people just assume, if that guy's good at computers, therefore anything that involves a computer, he's the guy to do
He's
it.
my go-to guy.
Right. So yeah, I told him absolutely not. You need to find someone else. I would trust me. I would have loved to have been able to help him. Because ever since the App Store came out, I was like, I'd love to have an app on the App Store. I think that'd be really cool. And so I said, I wish I could, but I can't. And he said, well, take your time, figure it out. And he was really picky with who he wanted. He didn't, for some reason, I think he wanted the person to be a magician, which I suppose makes sense. And I think he wanted a developer who he knew. And so it didn't really leave too many people. And I technically wasn't a developer, but he said, figure it out. And I said, I'll give it a go. And I somehow, I mean, thinking about it now, I remember at the time sitting in front of drawings of things, and just I wrote down every question I had, and I really couldn't work out how the hell to build an app, and I was Googling like crazy. And I mean I still do a lot of those things today, to be honest, and I sound so yeah, it was pretty much that. And somehow after about a year I made what is Magic SMS 2, and that was a complete rebuild of what he had originally, and I added a few more features, and it kind of looked like iOS 7, which it still kind of does. And yeah, so that was the first app I made. And as I made that, I kind of had other ideas around the same time and think, this would be quite cool. And I was exploring other stuff. And then I started making apps, and that's kind of what I do today.
So did you pursue apps because you saw their potential for the Magic community, or is it just a combination of your two passions? Did you fall in love with app making and Magic, or did you think that the app making is what the Magic community needed?
That's a great question. I think it's both. I mean, Magic and apps or technology or anything is it's by definition, I think, hugely unexplored. It's a hugely unexplored area, because I mean, Magic and technology, that's a lot of Magic methods rely on technology, be it actual technology or even, I suppose, I was thinking about this recently, like an invisible elastic thread, what you could call something like that technology, that we're always using things which are kind of ahead of the time. And so I don't think Magic and software was, it's been a fairly used thing here and there, but it's not as explored as, how many ways can you do a double lift or something like that. There's not many, there's not as many people in that field kind of looking around. And so I thought partly, I think they kind of go hand in hand. I wanted to have apps, and I wanted to kind of explore that world, and I'm a huge fan of both. But I don't think I would have done anything had I not thought, I think this is a huge unexplored area. Craig Filicetti and those guys, there's a lot of people who kind of combine Magic with hardware, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. And trying to, keep Magic things hidden, or even tech that's even kind of overtly used. But as soon as people start putting phones in their pockets rather than other stuff, I suppose back in the day it was, let me borrow your pocket watch, sir, or something. And these days it's
exactly.
So yeah, I suppose as soon as kind of tech enters the public eye and becomes a bit more ubiquitous, people got phones on them, I think it just makes more and more sense. And it's obviously one of those things you're not going to find in an old Magic book. So it's and even still with me and some others exploring it, it's still a very unexplored place. So I think I recognized that. And given I love both, I thought, hey, why not?
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I always thought of it as, we have these devices that have so many potential features. Let's play with that. But
absolutely.
I never thought of it from the perspective of, this is a device that everybody has in their pocket.
Yeah.
What's the one thing everyone always carries is a phone, wallet, keys. That's it, right? So, that's what we should be doing.
There's two ways of looking at it, I suppose. There's the way of, I've got this device on me which has got an accelerometer built in. It's got a compass going. It's got all this stuff which I can use secretly in a performance as a, I don't know, impression pad or whatever it might be. But there's also the side of the coin where someone's got a phone on them because, people have phones on them these days, and you can use that to show them a trick with one of their own possessions. So you've got these two kind of things, and I think there's these two different types of magic software which kind of either uses your device as a secret tool or uses the spectator's device as a kind of piece of overt technology within an effect.
So would you consider yourself, I don't know, like if someone asked you, like, what do you do? What do you do for a living? What would you tell them?
I suppose a magician is probably what I'd say. I suppose.
What do you say? Like, people ask you.
I think I hesitate as well. I don't know. What do I normally say? It depends what I'm working on at the moment, really. I think right now I'm working on some app stuff for myself. But when, for example, I've been working on some TV projects and some consulting jobs, then that becomes my kind of full-time thing. So I don't know. I think it varies, and right now, I don't know, magician/developer, trying to merge the two in some ways, I suppose. Something like that. I don't know. I don't have a name for it.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on, sort of for the people at home, is that, as magicians, one of the most difficult things is to do something unique. And people are always saying, like, do what you like, be yourself, all this different stuff. And it comes to discovering somebody who literally takes a love for technology and a love for magic and puts them together, right? And I think it's such a perfect example to show to the teens of the world right now, that are just getting into magic, who are going to be, everyone is going to be better at computers and coding than it was in this generation. You know what I mean? Like, you were the anomaly now, and I'm trying to, find a way to encourage the next set of people to reach out and combine their other interests with the other, let it be technologies or whatever it is in the world, So I was just wondering if you wanted to touch on that a little bit, sort of how those two things mesh together and sort of how that's giving you a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, isn't it? I think magic is very kind of self-referential, and it's very kind of, no one dares step out of it sometimes, and everyone takes inspiration from other magic tricks and other stuff. And I think it's hugely important to sometimes look to other fields and other hobbies of your own, or other things that you think might be well married with magic, and kind of bring those to magic. So I'm I suppose lucky that I'm very interested in tech. Although, as you say, there's going to be a lot more people, and as tech moves forward, I think there'll be people who kind of keep more on top of it than I certainly will be able to. Just because they'll be growing up in a different time. But even if it's not technology, be it, I don't know, music or whatever it might be, I think it's a hugely important thing. I would never have even considered releasing stuff if I wasn't thinking that I was kind of bringing something else to it, if that kind of makes sense.
Right.
And I think doing other things outside magic also can make better performers and people slightly better, knowing these other arts and other things. And even if you're not making a new trick, it might kind of help your magic in one way or another.
I really like the angle of mentioning that you wouldn't be creating something if you didn't think that you were really adding something new to it, And I think that it makes a big difference because there's so many people who are uploading like a 19th handling of the same trick.
Right.
And it, not that there's any problem with it. If that handling solves problems for you, great. But, thinking about the things that move the magic world forward leaps and bounds, it's the people that really reach out and pair together their other interests and abilities and things like that.
Right. Hey, I've got a couple of things that I don't think are. I mean, I've got many things that I don't think are revolutionary by any means. I've got some stuff which I think certainly is kind of maybe not been done before and is pretty useful in its field. But I mean, yeah, as you say, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I certainly think these things have their place, and I think creators hopefully recognize that some things, might be variations, and some things might be a little bit better. But I think the things which are mostly revolutionary, I don't think would always come from within Magic itself. I think,
Right.
you see sometimes people merge stuff. I speak about some other guys who kind of make hardware products and kind of build those into technology. There's some amazing kind of carpenters who can make incredible props, which I certainly, would never be able to do. And I think that's where you get the biggest kind of pushes in Magic.
Yeah. I agree. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's like the old argument, sort of like close up being an art and stage being a craft because you have to build things. But like I don't agree with that statement. It's an old point that has been brought up to me, and I like the idea of letting your other crafts come into this, right? Like finding ways for you to create outside of the standard medium.
Right.
So where do you get your inspiration for coming up with some of these apps?
So yeah, I can give you an example. I have. I mean, it varies. It completely varies. I should say that up front. It's not always the case that I've kind of suddenly thought, oh, wouldn't this be a good idea? Some of these things are either kind of I felt maybe a logical progression of something else, and then I sat there and thought about it and thought, actually, no, that doesn't make sense. This makes sense. But so an app I've recently released, which is called Wikitest, I think. Wikitest. It hasn't, that's not me being silly. It hasn't had a name for the last 4 years, and it's a very recent name for me. Wikitest. Wow.
I know all about it.
Right. So yeah, it's a book test with Wikipedia. The idea, I mean, it's something that as I say, I've played with for a few years now. But I think the idea was really, well, I can say this because it wouldn't really expose anything. It's when the first Pebble smartwatch came out, and I follow a lot of kind of tech people on Twitter, and I think I heard about it on the day that the Kickstarter was announced, which is what it originally was. Yeah. When that first came out, I was thinking, oh, of course, this would be amazing for Magic, and I can imagine magicians would be all over things like this. And this was way before the Apple Watch or anything like that. So I saw it, and I thought, you could get a spectator to type in a word on a thing, and then you'd get the word. And I think this was mostly over one day, where I was thinking, well, why would you get someone to type in a word? And I just thought maybe they're looking something up. Right. And it kind of just went from there. And it just went into, this could be like a kind of book test type thing where, why are they looking something up? Well, maybe you're doing a book test with that thing. So therefore, I kind of had these two words, the page they're on, and the word on the page. And I say I'm not exposing anything because I never perform it with a Pebble or any smartwatch or anything, but that's where it originally came from. Whereas on the flip side, I've got an app called Double Take, where you send someone a message and they read the message. It's really, in my head, it was designed to be performed live, but they read the message. You then have them choose a card, and let's say it's the Three of Hearts. And when they read the message again, they see all references to the Three of Hearts throughout the message that they missed the first time. And the birth of that. The birth of that. I mean, I think it sounds better than what it is. I think on paper, I think it's a great trick. In practice, it's not my favorite app, but it works. But the way I thought of that was, I don't know if you guys ever saw this, but there was this little GIF going around that looked like you were typing. You'd send it to someone via iMessage. Yeah. And it's these three dots, and it was forever looping animation, and the recipient would see that, and it looks like the same kind of icon that comes up when.
So you drive people crazy because they're waiting.
Right. So I saw that, and I was like, it'd be cool if you put kind of text in there and made it look like a text with a speech bubble with text, and then you could kind of control the animation a little bit so that you had a frame and another frame that it would turn into. And that's where it kind of was born from. That was more kind of method first, then effect, rather than thinking, which I suppose Wikitest was as well in some way.
So it's interesting because it seems like, while there's totally different ways that you're coming up with the inspiration, it's kind of all because, and obviously enough, but it's all because, you've got one hand in the honeypot of magic and one hand in the honeypot of tech, right? So anytime something in magic pops up, you think about how it would work in the tech world, and then anytime something new in tech pops up, you think about how appealing that is for magic, right? So it's almost that duality.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I noticed recently, there's maybe 3 or 4 categories of accounts that I follow on Twitter, and one of them, which is a very small one to be honest, are magicians, and the other ones are either tech stuff or design stuff, or just other things that I'm interested in.
Right.
And so my Twitter timeline and some of my other social network timelines are just all these different things that I like, and I don't internally categorize them in my head, but whenever I see one that might be relevant to a trick, I'll be like, "Huh, that's a good idea." And most of the time, I don't think these come from magic tweets; they come from either tech stuff or other stuff. So, but having the knowledge of magic, I would never have thought of a book test or something else if it wasn't for that. So it probably would have been a bit of a weirder trick where someone just typed something in for no reason and I get it. So I think it's important to be well versed in the other thing if you're doing something outside of magic as well.
You've worked with some of basically the biggest names in the magic industry, doing what you do. And if I understand correctly, it was on David Blaine's new show that the Wikitest first premiered. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So how did that sort of come about? Did he find you because of your work with apps? Were you working with someone? Sort of how did that come about? And then what was it like?
Oh, sure. I've been working on a few little TV shows here in the UK, and obviously I've always been a huge fan of David Blaine, and I think his shows are consistently great. And I think anyone, when you've been doing magic for enough time and you're interested enough in it, and perhaps you've gone to some conventions or whatever, I think everyone turns out to be friends or mutual friends or something. Everyone's kind of at least 1 or 2 degrees away.
Yeah, how many degrees of separation from David Blaine?
Yeah. Right. So I think everyone's at most 1 or 2 degrees away from David Blaine or anyone in the magic world. And so we've got mutual friends, and I think because I'd released a few things by that point, and I'd also worked on a few other TV things over here. 1, maybe 2 of our mutual friends had mentioned my name to him perhaps over a few months, and I think he was at one point just looking. I think any magician's always looking to scout for tricks and ideas for their new show and brainstorm with magicians. I think he's quite fond of meeting people, and I suspect he asked. I got a text from one of my friends, but I suspect the conversation on that side was, "Do you know anyone who does any good phone stuff or has anything that works with phones?" And my friend suggested me, and so we met a few years ago now. And it's over the last 2 years or so, I've been on and off on his last TV show, Beyond Magic.
Now that you're making different apps, working with different people, are you still doing all of the building yourself? Because it seems like with each new app, you sort of have to reach into a new territory. So is that the whole part that you still enjoy, or are you working with some of the best people on the developer world and stuff because now you are able to?
Right. No, I'm still doing everything myself. It's still all my.
It's awesome.
I develop it all and design everything, and there's a lot more that's going on to what you don't, to what you see. There's things like the whole back end stuff, which is, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, which people don't really see, and you just get to use. And I'm a huge fan of making. I think the problem with magic apps, they've got this weird duality because they need to be a good magic product, but they also need to be a good app, I think. And I think a lot of people who've made magic apps in the past make good magic products, but they don't make them necessarily good apps. And there's a lot of
design is atrocious.
Right. And they're kind of tricky to use, which I think. I think magicians have a little bit more of a tolerance over than the general public, But I'm not happy with that, and I wouldn't feel comfortable using something if I wasn't sure if it was going to work. And I think the design also kind of gives you a little bit of a kind of certainty that some work's also gone into it and made it look and feel nice. And therefore I think you kind of inherently trust it more. And I think tech, especially tech magic, is quite tricky to trust sometimes. I mean, you can't always. If you had the choice between using an electronic product and an analog product, I think most people go for the analog, if provided they looked exactly the same and there wasn't a huge benefit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's tricky. I do everything myself, but I'm now in the advantage where across my range of apps, there's some things which are shared. So if, for example, I need I don't know, something as mundane as a setting screen or a certain bit of code, or maybe something, that's not really, that's just got a function within my code, I can just go through one of my other Magic projects and copy it on over. So I've got this kind of huge library of stuff that I've made, and I can just bring it over. But yeah, it's not always that easy. Sometimes I'll work on something that requires quite a lot of new thinking and new coding and stuff. And yeah, I normally work on these things, and I'm sitting on my desk, and I don't notice, but the sun's just risen, and I've been working on it all night. That happens quite a lot, and I put many hours into these things to make them feel quite usable.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens when you're doing something that you love. You realize you're like, wow, I've been working on this for like 12 straight hours. I haven't even eaten yet.
Right. It was a huge lesson for me. Feeling. It's a huge lesson to me as well, because I've never had that before. I love Magic, but I'll never practice card sleights or anything until the early hours. I'm always very conscious as to what time it is. But when I suddenly was working on something, and I was kind of really into it, and I'm really looking, it happens really, really often that I'll be working and it'll just be throughout the night. And I think it's a sign that I'm enjoying it. And I'm also I think my philosophy with these things is I'm making something that I would want to use, and so I really make these things for me. And then me releasing it is just kind of one of these things that also happens. So I make it as good as I can. If I think of a new feature or something, that would be good, and maybe I'll add that in. But really, I'm thinking in my head, how would I want it, and then when I release it at the end, that's kind of just an extra little step.
Yeah.
That's awesome, because, I mean, that's really, the artist's dream, right, is to create for yourself and have other people appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So, it's great fun.
And it's also, you're talking about artists, but also, from a business standpoint, to say, like, if I'm having this problem, if I can make a solution for me, there has to be other people who would love this solution,
Right.
So I think both it's a great approach. One of the issues with using technology in Magic, which comes up often, is that it might be transparent, right? Some of the times it's like
the old timers.
The old timers think so, but even simple things that if you don't handle it correctly, it can be very transparent. I'll give you an example. I don't know what it's called, but the decks of cards where each of the card has a microchip in it,
right.
Whatever that is, right? So you could handle that in a way that's so poorly handled that it's like, well, the only way that you could do that is if something was, sending you some sort of technological, right? So I bring that up to say, how do you take that into account? Do you take that into account? How do you make sure that the Magic that you create with these apps has multiple lines of, reasoning?
It's a great question, because I think there's a lot of people working on a similar kind of area of Magic, if not the same, and I think often don't consider it as much as they should. I think also the consumers don't as well. I think a lot of magicians sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of seeing a new effect on the market and then being more amazed with the technology behind it, or the method, right. I suppose, in a more old effect, and then the actual effect itself, and perhaps not necessarily carefully considering these things. I recently wrote a piece in Half Man's Quarterly magazine, which is coming out, which is the 1010, which is a silly binary joke, commandments of tech magic.
That is funny.
and it's really tricky. There's a lot of things to consider, which I think that some apps don't, and I think it's also important for performers to to think of these things. And so, I mean, some of them, for example, talking about justification, one of them, as a quick example, is, I suppose it's valid even in analog magic and less digital stuff, which is to carefully consider what power you have as the magician. And I think it's even more apparent in tech magic, because it's so easy to think, oh, I'm doing a little set with my phone, I'm doing a little magic bit, a little tech magic bit in my act or whatever, and you think, oh, let's just put the phone tricks in here. But that's not always a good thing to do, because there's some tricks where you as the performer might be able to show you've got control over technology, right? So you might be able to, if someone names a card and you can make it appear or something on the screen or wherever it might be.
Right.
And then your next trick might be a prediction effect, where you take a phone and put it face down and someone names something and you turn over the phone and there it is on the screen.
So at the end, who's the magician here?
Right. But then your first trick, you've kind of shown, well, I can kind of control what's on the screen. And then your second thing is saying, no, that's absolutely set in stone. I can't control what's on the screen because I'm not touching the phone. Well, you've just kind of negated the two. And there's so many things that I think people need to consider. And it's easier to do so with cards and with, more analog magic that we have, because we're used to that. And there's books which have been written and lots and lots of literature that we have to our disposal. Whereas with tech magic, there's not many books written on iPhone 7 magic, on iOS 10. And,
yeah, exactly.
And also tech moves so quickly, so it's really hard to...
As soon as you write a book, it'll be out of date.
That's it. That's the other thing as well.
You have to write a PDF.
Right. Yeah, an iBook. I just think it's important to kind of at least keep traditional magic rules or update them and kind of keep them in mind as people use phones for things. I mean, another example is magicians often use apps and effects that use their own phone. And I think that's fine. But, let's imagine you did a magic show where, for some reason, your entire audience have turned up with a deck of cards in their pocket. And you bring someone up on stage, and they've got deck of cards in their pocket. Maybe they've even brought it out a couple of times, and then you're going, "Let me use my ordinary deck of cards." It's a little strange, right? I mean, everyone in that room has got a phone on them,
right?
And so it's tricky, and it's not always the case that that's better. There are some reasons why you might use your own. Maybe you've got a phone number on your phone or something. But I still think I think tech magic needs the same, if not more, consideration than.
Yeah, like there's these important justifications. Another one that's funny is I remember in the early generations of iPhone magic, I feel like there was so many iterations of this, but it was like an invisible deck trick. And like why you would take a card trick, and move it onto a phone,
right,
is like it's just like, it's the obvious example. I remember many years ago, I was jamming with Daniel Garcia, and he made this joke. He was like, anytime any magician comes up with any idea that's even a little bit good, their first idea goes, let's see how this relates with cards.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me.
It's. I think there's the bigger issue there is that effects don't always translate well to technology. I mean, if you take, for example, Find the Lady, I remember there was an online site, and it would say you're always going to lose at Find the Lady or something. I think that was the title or something, or at least what they were intending. And so it showed you 3 cards, and it showed you where the queen is, and then you kind of see this mix-up procedure. And you click on 2 cards, and it's not the queen, and you click on the other one.
Right.
You always find it last. And I mean, no one's going to sit there and be fooled. But I mean, because you can't tell that these two things correlate to each other. You know that the back and the face of the card are digitally simulated, and that the computer's got full control. And yet, when you do it in real life, it works. So that's an extreme example, but there's still so many instances where it just doesn't always work. And yeah, you're right. Going straight into card tricks is not always the right idea either.
And also that oftentimes, and this is something that people have to worry about in non-tech magic, but it's super important in tech magic, is that someone can come up with a solution involving tech that's totally reasonable, but not the one that you use, right? And
absolutely.
That's something that they always, everyone always thinks that all tech magic tricks are done with voice. Right,
of course,
exactly.
Voice recognition. Yeah.
So, but what's important is that you actually need to prove that it's not voice recognition, right? If you're using tech, because you know that someone's going to assume that it might be.
Completely, yeah. Even if it doesn't make sense. I mean, there's some tricks where it's possible that no one says anything, but if the person goes home and just goes, I mean, another problem that we have is people have iPhones and smartphones, and they are inherently magical. By default, you don't know how this device works. You tap on something, and it just you kind of get used to its functions, but really, it's a small little box, and you can even, I know I sound like an older person, but you can make a video call around the world, and you just kind of get used to the effect of it. You don't
But
get,
it's true. It's super true.
right. It's still, it is amazing. We don't stop to think about it these days, but it's incredible. And so when you're doing something, it's so easy for someone just to go, yeah, it's got an app. Even if it's not, there's no reason
Right.
behind it. It's so easily dismissed with just saying it's an app. So I think it's so crucial that you use tech wisely to either a trick which makes sense for it, not necessarily just by saying, write it down, don't say it, so it's not voice recognition. I think the effects can sometimes be better suited to tech where that wouldn't even
Right.
come into their mind. So as a quick example, I mean, I've got an app called Earworm, which is a music.
I love that
prediction
one.
system. Oh,
That's
great.
how we crossed paths.
Oh, right, yeah, that's right. So it's a song, song prediction effect. Whereas, so back in the day, you'd think, well, the only way for this kind of effect to be possible, it would probably be a slightly different effect. Something would compromise here because you'd probably need like a big stereo or boombox or something and a big stack of
Right.
CDs. And you'd say to someone, I'm going to put a CD in and press play and turn the volume down, and you're going to try and guess what song it is, or I'm going to predict the song or whatever it might be. Whereas these days we've got technology, so now we've got the kind of huge internet at our disposal, which is much bigger than we can kind of comprehend.
A
And
library. Yeah.
right, so rather than just a huge stack of CDs where there's going to be a limited choice, this is a kind of enhanced version of an effect that wasn't previously possible, and so therefore it makes sense that we're using technology. It kind of doesn't just make sense because the technology is also giving us a trick that wouldn't have been possible in that same form, 10, 15 years ago. Um, so I think as long as the spectator understands and an audience understands the reason as to why you're involving technology in a performance, and that it seems like a logically justified thing. Wikipedia, for example, is far bigger than any library's book collection.
Right.
So as long as that's a probably well justified point, it doesn't always have to be, but as long as someone can understand that, then I think people might be less skeptical as to maybe the phone's got something to do with the method, because now the phone's actually got something to do with the effect.
Yeah, I think it's mega important to keep that stuff in mind, and also to keep in mind that like just because the method is as clever as I put it in air quotes, like tech, doesn't mean that you don't need to do all of the regular things in Magic, which is, make sure that you are eliminating that solution, eliminating all the other possible false solutions, like making sure that, all the good things that you need to make sure that you're doing as a magician, they don't just fall at the wayside when you're using something as powerful as tech.
Absolutely. It's a tiny subset of tricks which are possible from classical tricks which can be translated well. And but the benefit is that we get a load of new tricks that wouldn't have been previously possible as well, I think.
I think so too, and I think that tricks like earworm and like that, that's the one that I've played with quite a bit, is just a fantastically impossible piece of magic, that would not be possible, and it also, like you were just talking about with justification,
Right.
it makes perfect sense, like there's no missing part, there's no weird thing that you have to do. It makes perfect sense. You would take someone's phone, to prove to them that you know the song they're gonna think of, you would look it up, right?
Yeah.
That's what you would do. So
I think the best effect can also almost be, you'd almost think of it as that way without the method having taken part. For example, if I
exactly.
I want to do a song prediction, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to carry a huge boombox, and I certainly don't have an infinite CD library, so I suppose I would use my phone. And then I think, well, actually, the best thing to use in the room would be your phone, because you're the one,
Right.
you trust your phone, and it's make a prediction. And so, yeah, I think it needs to be quite carefully considered, so that the effect still makes sense as well.
So there's one other thing that I wanted to chat about that is not exactly in the world of Magic, but I thought that I would bring it up. Have you ever heard of a very famous blog post called 1,000 True Fans?
No.
Okay, so I'll just very quickly explain what it is. This guy named Ken Kelly wrote a blog post called 1,000 True Fans, and what it basically says is, to be a successful artist, you don't need to, be a millionaire, and like a billion people don't need to know who you are, anything like that. You basically need 1,000 true fans. And he defined a true fan as someone who's willing to give you $100 a year to do what you do.
Right.
And he said, like, and I always thought that was so beautiful, right? He said, like, you're not trying to change the entire world, but if you can change 1,000 people's worlds a year, and whether it's the same 1,000 people or a different 1,000 people, first of all, you can make an income for yourself. And second of all, like, you're a successful artist. You're helping people. They're buying your product. You're doing it. And it's a sustainable thing. So
right.
I remember that blog post really came to the front of my mind when I discovered what you did, because I just thought he creates incredible apps for a very small group of people and, satisfies them very well. And I think that I just wanted to ask you sort of, what's that like as a career? You've got groups on Facebook who follow the apps that you've created. It's a very, very, very small niche. Like, you're not like tackling like all the people who want to work out in the world. You're not, you're tackling people who are magicians, who are using apps, who can afford to use an app, that's really this impactful and this powerful, and you're satisfying these people. So I just wanted to sort of mention that blog post and see if you had any comments on that.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. I think to be a magician, you're already in a it's a tiny percentage of people that are magicians. Interested in mentalism. Most of my stuff tends to be mentalism based.
Yeah.
Owns an iPhone, a fairly modern iPhone, and English speaking. Most of my apps are only in English.
Yeah.
It's such a. I think about it. There's 5 people. I think there's 5 of us. It's strange. As I say, when I make these things, I mean, initially at first, when I first came up with Wikitest, I still had my full-time job in banking, and when I was making Magic SMS for Angelo, I was still there as well.
Right.
Really, I was making this stuff for me, and the fact that anyone is interested in buying it is even every sale I get it's still odd for me to think that there's someone out there who has taken interest in something which as I say, I absolutely don't even think that anyone else out there would be interested, but it's odd. I realized, and I think, to be honest, I think there's such a niche market and it's so small, but I think it's absolutely growing. I don't think this number would never exceed the number of magicians, so we're inherently a small market by default,
right?
But technology, it's an up and coming thing. It's something which everyone's, phone magic is just, people carry phones in their pocket, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
So, I think the 1,000 True Fans, it sounds like a great concept, and I suppose, me releasing a couple of apps a year is kind of pretty much, I'm doing that exact thing, I guess, in a weird way.
Yeah, that was how it came to my mind, so I just thought I would mention it to know if it was a conscious thing or not.
Yeah, no, these days I've got many more apps and things that I've started and I abandoned and whatever, and now and then I'll think of one again, and maybe I'll have another idea, and I either think that could be its own app, or maybe there's a kind of thing I've already got that could benefit from that or something. Be it from the magic.
Because I was about to ask you the obvious question, which is, if you make apps for yourself and you use them for yourself for a while to make sure they're great before they make it their way to the magic community, the obvious question is, are we expecting something awesome coming to the magic community shortly?
I've got a few bits and pieces here and there, and I sometimes sit on them or forget about them and whatever. It's tricky. It's not an easy thing to do. Some things I've thought of just suddenly, by going, that would be a neat idea, and some things I've thought of by going, by seeing something else in the tech world or whatever, and maybe at the end of that day I've kind of got a well fleshed out idea that I think could be something good. Right now I've got a few little bits and pieces. I don't think I've got a huge thing, especially nothing that's kind of ready for the next few months or so, but maybe with Wikitest, which I only released in December. And when I released that, I released it with, in fact, more of the functionality that I had than over the last few years. And there's something which is perhaps interesting, which is when I make something for myself, I don't really have to consider, what's going to happen when many people are using this thing at once, or how do I kind of work out. There's magic questions to be solved and justification issues, but there's so many other questions. Instructions are one thing. I mean, when we download an app, you download Facebook or Twitter, and your iPhone doesn't come with any instructions. It's the most complicated piece of technology that you own, but it comes with no manual to say how to use it. Whereas your toaster, which is a pretty easy thing to use, comes with instructions to tell you exactly what to press and what to do. And apps kind of follow the same philosophy in general. The Twitter app, Facebook, or whatever you have on your phone, they don't come with any real instructions, but we come from the magic world where, you need something to kind of explain everything and what everything does. And so I try and balance a happy medium between those two and keep the app as intuitive as I possibly can, and whilst kind of putting instructions in as well. And so I never have to consider any of this stuff when I'm just making something for myself. And
for you, right?
I also need kind of security in some way. I need to make sure that Magician A isn't able to kind of control or mess up Magician B's trick. Not that I think it's going to go, it's going to, because it's not,
But you have to worry about those things when you're dealing with,
you have to think about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, this is more on the techie side, but there's a lot more questions to consider than I think people would first think. And so, there's a lot of work that kind of goes into the ideas that I kind of have in my Dropbox and stuff are like little simple things. If I ever wanted to release one of these things, there's a whole host of stuff which kind of goes with it. But I suppose in answer to your question, not yet. Maybe I've got some stuff, and
cool.
We'll see. But it's
cool.
always
There's
changing.
Some stuff coming. I would be remiss to not mention the Jerks app, which I don't know how much we can talk about its functionality, but I just want to thank you because I think it's really, really cool. And I wanted to ask you, what was the procedure like working with Andy? I don't know how much you can share, but I think it's just interesting because it seems like everything's very secretive and hidden. So I'm just wondering what the process was like.
Oh, I mean, yeah, fine. I mean, I've never met up with the guy. We've spoken by email quite a bit. It seems like he's clearly a really, really smart guy. But I think we've spoken about some other app ideas since as well. Not necessarily for public release, but just to see if some ideas are possible.
Yeah.
What was it like to work on the app? Pretty normal. I get contacted about ideas a lot. I get a lot of people emailing me and saying they've got an idea, and I think. I mean, it's tricky for people because people obviously haven't considered the stuff that I've had to consider over the years as well, and it's tricky for me. I certainly don't claim to know everything about tech magic, and I'm still learning as well. And so when someone's got an app idea, it would be something that I often think maybe there's something which could be improved or whatever. So I'm always kind of open, and I'll discuss it back and forth.
Right.
And I rarely take on other projects. I did Angelo's thing; it was the very first thing that I did. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, I do everything myself, and I like it that way because I get to stay awake up at late at night and work on this stuff.
Working on things you like,
right? Knowing that it's all mine. I'm not doing this for another company or another person. It's all my own. So I like to keep these things updated and still working. And so when I take on something for someone else, it's a strange thing which I've never really done. But I did this because I thought it was a great idea. I'm a huge fan of the Jerks, and I really love the idea. And I think there's the nice thing about that is it's a toolbox really with my stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my stuff. I think for its advantage, they do one trick really. Each one kind of does one trick or at least one main
really
thing.
Well. Yeah.
I put work into making it do it as best as I possibly can. I would say. Whereas the Jerks app is very different. It comes with in his book he's got an excellent
an array of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Whereas. And so you can just let your mind wander and think, oh, that would be a good use of the app. And so that was really fun to kind of work out those things. I think I added a few extra things that to the app that he didn't think of as well, and then we kind of just went back and forth. And I think it's a pretty good app. And it's on the App Store. I don't think it's it's on the App Store just out of necessity, so people can get it if you haven't got the book already. But it's not the cheapest of apps for the reason that it was really only for sale if you bought the book.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. There's one other thing that we do when we get to the end of the episode, which is the three of us go around and we mention one thing from the episode that we thought was particularly important. Because, it's an hour-long episode and people could have missed it, and just a one take-home point. So for me, I thought the most important part was, mixing the things that you do. It seemed like so much of the creativity came from having one leg in the magic world and one leg in the the tech world. So I think that's the part that really stuck with me, and I think that should stick with other people at home. Diversifying your interests really make a big impact in how creative you can be. So that was really important for me. Tyler, what about you?
I've always been on the fence about technological magic, and I don't know, it just came, I don't remember how it came up, but just the idea that technology is everywhere and it's so integrated into our lives that I now feel I'm being foolish by not using technology, because it's just part of everyday life. And if you can find something extra outside of tech, if you can push that further than people are prepared for or aware of, then you're going to be doing something very natural and magical.
And Mark, is there something from the episode that you think is particularly important for the people at home?
Can I repeat yours? Is that? I think that's
you can say, you can do anything you want.
Yeah, I think it's the exact same thing. I think I don't want it to sound like work, like you've got to go out and start exploring other stuff, but I just think it's stuff you're already interested in. For me, I'm a big nerd, and technology is something that I really enjoy. And it's not, it's just I get to browse the web and see the latest product and see what latest kind of tech stuff is out and the new technologies. There'll be a new app that does a new thing, and I'll go, oh, that's interesting. And I'm not sitting there doing it consciously or even thinking about magic. So I think the lesson might be, or at least a kind of good bit of advice might be, if you're, whatever your interest is, maybe just one day just think, how, is there a good magic trick or a good lesson or something that I can kind of take across? I think just don't give up other stuff, and maybe go explore some other stuff. If you're not that interested into too many things, go and have a look, think maybe, what's this kind of side of life like, or what do people do in this world? And I think you can always take things back and push magic forward.
Awesome. I think that's incredible advice. The last thing we do on the episode is, now that you have at least 1 million magicians listening to you right now.
iPhone using English speaking
mentalist loving
all
magicians. All 5 of us, we're all listening. Is there anything that you want to tell them all? Any PSA, anything from a PSA to word of warning, positive, negative, or even a plug?
I think, good question. I suppose it's this, which is because Wikitest is quite fresh for me, and it's something that I've released. Because I really care about how it is, and I want to make it as good as possible. I end up kind of not, when I was maybe 5 or so years ago, or maybe a few more, before I even considered having an app on the App Store, I was always thinking that, that would be incredible. That would be great. And I'd have my own apps and stuff, or just my own app. I was just thinking about one at the time. And I always thought, getting to that goal would be amazing. And so I thought I would really enjoy it and really be, it'd be great. And it is great. But I think it's easy to sit there and get kind of too obsessed with it and not enjoy it. And so I think my thing would be, when you're creating magic or whatever it might be, it's probably worth thinking of, trying to enjoy it as you go. I kind of get inundated with some tech support at the beginning, and then thinking about these updates and thinking, this bit doesn't work. And, sometimes I think it's important to kind of take a step back and look at it and go, no, it's quite fun. So enjoy it more. I'm guilty of getting too obsessed with some stuff sometimes and taking it all to heart. And so, I think what we do is great, and being able to browse the web and search for techie stuff and magic stuff and whatever, and get paid for doing so, I think is a real fun thing. So I think people should enjoy it.
Honestly, I think that's a fantastic message, and I also think that it resonates a lot with you're talking about, like realizing the sun is coming up in the morning and you're still working on it. Right. And that's like, the whole element of that is that, you're working on something that's fun for you, and that like exploring the fun aspects of magic and not the grueling ones is the one that's going to allow you to like, put in 12 hours through a night and not even realize that you did it because you're enjoying yourself so much and, doing something so awesome.
Right. Great.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I will tell the entire world, where should they go find your apps?
You can, there's a link to all of them on my website, which for its short URL is marc.ph, which is marc.ph.
Amazing. So that's where I would go check it out if you're wondering what the heck we've been talking about this whole episode. Again, Marc, big, huge thank you for coming on and answering all of our questions, chatting with us, and having a great time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And of course,
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
That's right.
And we will see you next week on Discourse in Magic.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 58. Very quickly, the Discourse in Magic podcast grows solely on word of mouth. It would mean the world to me if you found one magician who you know who doesn't know about this podcast and spread the word. If every single listener did that, we could double our listenership. Now, I know that's a lot to ask, but just take a moment, think of any magician who you know who might not know about this podcast, and the next 24 hours, reach out to them and let them know it exists. I know I would be incredibly, incredibly grateful, and now the two of you will have something fun to talk about every week. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next Thursday.